My name's Sam Murley. I'm the EHS Digital Acceleration Leader for GE. I manage the emerging technology portfolio for the health and safety function with our business units across the globe. My team and I are hyper-focused on moving digital transformation initiatives forward across the company. So excited to be kind of in this session here. Pretty awesome stuff that was presented earlier from folks. So hopefully you find some of this content we're going to review together, kind of a practitioner's approach, maybe things you could take away, implement in your organization. I'm going to take kind of a macro to micro. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategy, our 5-year roadmap. I'm going to talk specifically about our pilot to deployment programs that are providing the most value when in use. And then we'll end it with some best practices and things that we've learned along the way. And I'll save some time for Q&A because I think it'd be good to get some discussion going. As you think of things, raise your hand, but feel free to add to the discussion as we get to the end. So this is our 5-year roadmap. This started almost 3 years ago now. So we're right in the middle. We're about to eclipse year 3 and get into year 4, which is extremely exciting. And I think there's a couple stories on this slide that maybe don't pop off right away. One, as an EHS function at a large organization, you think about the type of work that our workforce goes through every day, whether it's in GE's aviation business within a factory, our power and services teams, out into renewables where we have wind technicians climbing towers to turbines, out into healthcare where they're doing highly hazardous sometimes operations on MRI machines. Such a highly matrixed and highly complex risk portfolio. So when we got started a year ago, we said, let's get our digital strategy down first. We knew things like wearable technology were going to come. We knew we wanted to eventually move from a reactive and traditional EHS approach and balance that out with a proactive and predictive. So we threw these things up on the board. To be completely honest, it's changed quite a bit. But in year 3, generally we're seeing these 6 technology areas really have an impact on our high hazard and high volume use cases across the company. And as you look at those 6, and I'll read them off for the folks in the back, smart eyewear, augmented reality, heads-up display, definitely having an impact on operational excellence in general. We'll get to more of that. Lone worker wearables and voltage sensing and hazard sensing bands are increasing risk awareness at the front line while also adding to our data set on the back end. And then we've got true human augmentation technology. So exoskeletons, inspection robots. What can we put on the body to enhance worker capabilities while keeping them safe? And when can we completely remove a person from the risk altogether with something like an aerial or a tracked drone is kind of the theme and the things that we're really focused on right now. So as we look out into year 4 and 5, I think it gets more exciting for us. I think this is kind of the story generally in industry. And we're starting to play with some of these predictive technologies as well. But I think really the underlying theme with all of this is the importance of collecting data and managing data and making sense of that data, whether it's something that gets, data that gets created from your system of record or from some type of lone worker device or technology. That's what we always come back down to with this. So that was the 5-year strategy. This is, I really wanted to hone in on this right away. When we started really onboarding vendors, pilot programs, executing that process, it was very manual. And what we found is that we were kind of inherently creating our own gap or neck of the hourglass, if you will, with the amount of things we could push through. So that first year, it took us almost a year to take the first technology, which was smart eyewear, and get it to a deployment-ready state. And now we're doing that multiple times per quarter. And one of the reasons is our approach to grassroots, right? So we put in place a GE internal innovation hub where folks could come in from anywhere on the globe in any of the businesses and say, I've got an idea, I'm working with a vendor, here's my problem, and we start to churn and socialize and connect the dots internally within the company to help solve that problem. So it goes back to, a little bit back to kind of the strategy, where you have individual business units managing their own health and safety risks. You've got kind of, corporate governance and guidance. We wanted to meet somewhere in the middle. We wanted to say, okay, let's look at the risks that are coming out of our businesses and see where we're having those risks more broadly and not focus right away on niche use cases, but really broad opportunities. And let's do that within an innovation hub. So that's proven to be, I think, a big way that we onboard and take folks through the process together, whether it's folks at the site that are piloting technology or IT or HR. We're all in this system, collaborating, asking good questions, and making sure we save that off as a historical record of what we're doing and why. So that's the hub. The process, just very quickly, the process for us is threefold. It's build, measure, and deploy, or build, measure, learn, and deploy. Could be four. We always start with our problem statements, right? So what are one of those high volume risk categories or high risk, high hazard risk categories? Let's start there. Let's build the problem statement. Let's build our hypothesis as to why we think new technology may have an impact. And then from a corporate level, we inject the funding and procure that technology. So we're not necessarily building technology. Actually, most of the technology we have in place, which we'll talk about here shortly, we go out and want to partner with vendors and ecosystem partners, solution providers, folks in the other room, and have a quick impact. We don't want to develop something and have to wait 8, 12 months and then start to measure the impact. And that's been our strategy from the start. So we go through that kind of build process. What are we going to do? Let's validate it. Let's fund it. And then we go into measurement loops where we're onboarding new sites. We're measuring the impact. We're deciding, do we continue? Are we onto something really great here? And we'll go through those loops. Sometimes it takes a couple months. Sometimes it takes a few weeks. Sometimes it takes the better part of the year. But if we have adoption at scale within a pilot program, if we can measure the results when in use, actually quantifiably measure the results when in use that it's having an impact, then we switch gears and actually create an internal go-to-market strategy, almost a marketing campaign. And we build the C-suite and executive package so that financial leaders within our businesses can understand the opportunity that's in front of them, but know they don't have to start from scratch. Okay? So some notes from the field. I picked 3 of our most impactful initiatives to date, 3 out of a handful. And before I get into the first one, exoskeletons and ergonomic sensors, I'm just curious, how many folks have ever painted at their house or ever used a paintbrush? All right. Okay, so pretty much everyone. How long do you think you can paint on average? I know I need to bulk up or something. I'm shot after 5 minutes, but generally 7, 8, 10 minutes. Maybe a little more. All right. Imagine holding a heavy tool or a paint gun or welding for that amount of time. And you talk about a paintbrush is I don't know how many ounces, and some of these tools and things that people use every day are 10 pounds, 12 pounds, 25 pounds. And when we looked across the company at our high volume risk categories, ergonomic sensors and exoskeletons were instantly a no-brainer for us to try out. So today we have close to a 60% hit rate with exoskeletons, scaffolding for the body, true human augmentation. We're removing future injuries. We're doing it in a quick way because they're mostly passive. There's no batteries. They're not powered, so you don't have to worry about customs issues and shipping and those types of things. And where exoskeletons are our intervention mechanism of choice sometimes, ergonomic sensors are just as important. So on the flip side, where we introduce maybe a new assembly line process or a new procedure, or we just want to digitize the ergo assessment process, we'll deploy ergonomic sensors to do just that. So you think about it kind of on a linear spectrum. Ergonomic sensors tell me who's at most risk and why, and what should I do to bring that person out of risk, and then deploying exoskeletons as an intervention mechanism to manage that risk. And I think that's, for us anyway, that's where we've seen the most impact. with that type of technology. In the middle, it switches up a little bit, kind of continuing on the ergosensor theme, but what can we deploy to really understand what our exposure metrics are? What's our exposure risk, and what can we put on the body to do that in near real time? So you think about voltage sensing bands, you think about biometric sensors. Those are things that are actively being used within the company, ergosensors, and it really, one, from an end user perspective, gives that person the information they need to maybe reassess what they're doing at that time or alert them of an unknown risk they may not be aware of that could harm them. But the data that gets generated, that's pushed to the right people at the site, that's pushed up to business decision makers, is as equally as important. And then last but not least, probably the thing we've been working at the longest or the most is augmented reality, but we found great value with kind of the cousin or brother or sibling assisted reality. So sometimes it makes sense to really immerse someone in step-by-step instruction or some type of training content with AR. Other times, especially for field service type work, that may not make sense. That could actually introduce potentially more issues, especially if they're on some type of heads-up display. So we focused on really assisted reality, and a few things that we saw initially is the ability to reduce T&L almost instantly. So if we can connect an expert to the problem in real time with them staying where they're at and not having to hop on a plane, the technology pretty much pays for itself in that single session. I think the other thing for us is streamlining training and giving people contextual information as well. That's coming off the asset they're working on, or could be coming from a coworker who's downstream helping with a lockout tagout event. Those are the themes and some of the opportunities that have come from the use of heads-up display within the company. So we're going to kind of move into the second part here. What have we learned? I wanted to share this with you all. This is a summarized view, and please come get me because I know you may not be able to see this. If you're interested in talking after on any of this, come see me. But these are our connected worker principles. And when you think about everything everyone's talking about here and the opportunities, there are key stakeholders that need certain type of information. So what do your workers and wearers care about? What does your site personnel, your EHS leaders, your value stream leaders, what do they care about? And then what does the business or the financial leaders really care about within the realm of emerging technology? I'll just mention and pick a few, and they're kind of no-brainers. Workers and wearers want something that's comfortable. If you wouldn't wear it yourself, don't expect them to. It's got to be comfortable, it's got to be easy to use, almost wear it and forget it for it to be successful. And I think you've got to give them the ability to manage what data goes off of that device outside of that wearable. Extremely important thing that's bubbled to the top is the ability to detect hazards as well. So we talked about that earlier. But then as you kind of go up in the organizational chain, there's things that the site leaders care about. They may not care that your heart rate is spiked this morning, but they do want to know if you're at high, medium, or low risk, right? So there's kind of a data privacy strategy, I think, as you go up within the organization. I think an instant team dashboard where you can view who's at most risk, prioritize, go intervene, I think is extremely important. And then this whole concept, which you see it down here, of safety index trending. So what's my general safety index across a population or an individual? And I want to track that and see how we can move that hopefully into low risk. And last but not least, it's something we're working on is an ROI calculator. So let's put that package together for the C-suite to really understand what's the financial impact at scaling up more broadly. But in general, there's some shared things here. But again, I think it comes down to, for us anyway, the feedback we got over the past 3 years. These are the things that have bubbled to the top that are most important, okay? So the do's and the don'ts, and I'll mention just a few that aren't up here. I think one that should have made it up here is kind of know when you need to lead with consumer-first technology versus industrial-grade technology. So if you need buy-in from end users right away, you may want to lead with something that they're familiar with, that they're going to accept, just so you can start to churn some knowledge, right? Then you may need to flip it up down the road and deploy something that's intrinsically safe, more industrial grade. So that's something we play around with quite a bit. I think one of the other things, which I guess is up here, is create a living strategy. Don't be afraid to switch up your strategy, your roadmap, your plan. Ours was very much trial by fire, and it's changed a lot. It's always changing. And I think grassroots and building internal and external partnerships is equally as important. So to kind of wrap it all up, before we do maybe just a couple quick questions, this is our strategy. This is our footprint to date. These are the impacts in the middle that we see now across the company. So we started with a few things: high level, performance, simplification, people, and technology. In our footprint today, we have over 2,200 wearable devices in the pilot to deployment phase. That doesn't take into account the devices that have been deployed. We're supporting over 200 sites directly with their exploration and deployment of these emerging technologies. And something that we didn't do right away, which I wish we would have done sooner, is opened up benchmarking discussions with folks from Boeing and Ford and Toyota. Sometimes high level, sometimes more protected to get into details, but to really kind of amplify, right, your internal resources. What can we learn from, a benchmarking partner over here about this vendor, and how can that help us? And of course, as we may be further than others, what can we provide? How can we help others as they get up and going? And I think that's a really important metric, is your benchmarking partners when you look at your innovation goals and objectives. All right, so I kind of leave you with this, maybe thought-provoking, maybe some predictions, but this is actually a picture from a German futurist. His name's Gerd Leonhard. And he wrote a book. It's called Technology versus Humanity. I highly recommend at least subscribing to his YouTube channel. His book is kind of misleading, but he does talk a lot about, and others in industry, are we becoming more like machines, or machines becoming more like humans? And I think the keynote presenter this morning framed it up in the right way. That let's use these technologies to augment and offset the work that's maybe more mundane, routine, things that we don't want to do, things that are too hazardous, so we can free up our mind share and our mind power as a workforce, as an economy, to really focus on what's important. I think that's kind of an interesting way to think through these things. I think others that are much smarter than me say technology is going to advance more rapidly in the next 20 years than it did in the past 300. So I think things start to bubble to the top. In terms of data privacy and how to prep for those types of events. But I don't know, this is my third EWTS. It's exciting that we're not necessarily focused on prove that it works, who's got the best stuff, but we're talking about culture change, we're talking about post-pilot deployment, we're talking about go-to-market strategies and those types of things. So it's great to see that going on in general, and look forward to seeing where all of you land and where these things land maybe in the next year or two. So that's all from me. Appreciate your time.